navigating the world of international patents. It can feel, well, pretty complicated sometimes, right? So many rules, deadlines.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a maze. And sometimes the trickiest bits aren't about filing something new, but actually pulling something back, changing your mind midstream.
Which leads us right into today's deep dive. We're zoning in on a really specific part of that maze. MPP Section 1880. That's the section covering withdrawal of demand or election under the PCT.
Exactly. It's all about what happens when you need to back out of certain parts of the international process. We're digging into the MPP itself, the PCT rules, the whole 9 yards.
So our mission today is basically to break down what withdrawal actually means here, the how and when, and crucially, the potential fallout. The legal side effects. Think of this as your quick guide to a step that seems small but can have huge consequences.
We want you to feel confident understanding this part of the process.
Before we dive in, just want to give a quick shout out to Mike Shepard, our creative director, for putting this MPE series together. And as always, a heads up. This summary was put together with some help from AI tools. It's for info, educational purposes, okay? Not legal advice.
Definitely. Always check the official MPP or talk to a patent pro for specific advice. Right, so MPP 1880, withdrawal. What are we actually withdrawing here? There are two key things.
Okay, lay them out for us. First up is the demand, right? But it's not like you're demanding something aggressively.
No, not quite. It's PCT jargon. The demand is your formal request to start Chapter 2, the International Preliminary Examination, that optional second look at patentability by the IPEA.
Gotcha. So it's asking for that extra examination step, and the second thing you can withdraw is the election.
Exactly. The election is where you point to specific countries, the PCT contracting states, where you're thinking of eventually seeking patent protection in the national phase.
Okay, so MPEP 1880 lets you pull back the request for that optional exam, the demand, or pull back your intention for specific countries, the election. Makes sense?
Precisely. And you can be flexible. Withdraw the whole demand, or just withdraw the election for one country, or several, or even all of them. And there's a neat little rule, PCT Rule 90 bias point 4, that says if you withdraw all your elections.
I mean, guess. The demand is automatically withdrawn too.
You got it. Stands to reason, right? No point examining if you're not aiming for any specific country anymore.
Seems like something you'd only really consider if maybe your plans change or the initial search report wasn't looking too good.
That's often the trigger. Strategy shifts. Maybe the preliminary findings aren't great, or, frankly, managing the costs involved. But when you decide to do it, that's critical.
And this is where things get time sensitive, yeah. Is there a hard deadline?
Oh, yes. A very clear one. You have until before the expiration of 30 months from the priority date. That's your window, spelled out in PCT Article 37 and Rule 90 bias point 4.
30 months from priority. That date pops up a lot in the PCT world. It's kind of the big decision point for national phase entry in many places.
Exactly. By then, you usually have the search report, maybe the Chapter 2 report if you filed a demand, and you're staring down the costs of going national. So having the option to withdraw right up until that point makes strategic sense.
Okay, so you've decided to withdraw. You're within the 30 months. How do you actually do it? Just fire off an email?
Definitely not casual. Needs to be a formal notice. And you must submit it to the International Bureau, the IB. They're the central hub for PCT admin.
What if you mess up and send it to the IPEA, the examining authority, instead? Easy mistake to make, I'd imagine.
It is, but the system accounts for it. If the IPEA gets your withdrawal notice, they're obligated to mark the date they received it and forward it promptly to the IB.
But what's the official date, the one that legally counts? When you sent it? When the IPEA got it? Or when the IB finally receives it?
This is super important. The withdrawal is only effective on the date it's received by the International Bureau. That's it. Doesn't matter if it went via the IPEA first. The IB's receipt date is the trigger.
Okay, IB receipt date. Got it. So we know what, when, and how. Now for the big one. What actually happens? What are the legal consequences of hitting that withdraw button?
Yeah, so the bottom line is, it's usually quite significant. Unless a particular country's national law specifically says otherwise, and that's a key. Unless withdrawing the demand or the election for a specific state generally means your application's effect terminates in that state.
Termination. Wow, that sounds final. You're basically giving up on getting a patent there via this PCT route.
Pretty much. That's the default consequence. You're essentially abandoning ship for that country through that application.
Is there any situation where you withdraw an election, but somehow your application could still move forward in that country? Seems odd.
Actually, yes. And this is a really crucial point, a potential lifeline, maybe. It all comes down to timing and what you've already done. If you withdraw before the deadline for entering the national phase in that specific country under PCT Article 22.
Which is usually around that 30-month mark we talked about, but can vary a bit depending on the country.
Exactly. So if you withdraw before that country's specific national entry deadline, and mind you, this is an important part, you had already done everything needed to enter the national phase there on time. Like you'd already sent in translations, paid the fees. Then even though you withdrew the international election, your application might still be valid and proceed in that national office, depending on their laws.
Okay, walk me through that Japan example from the sources again. That helps make it concrete.
Sure. So imagine you elected Japan. Later, maybe at 29 months, you decide to withdraw the election for Japan. You send the notice, the IB gets it before 30 months. But let's say back at 28 months, you had already filed the Japanese translation and paid the fees with the Japanese Patent Office, meeting their national phase entry requirements.
Right.
Even though you later withdrew the election internationally because you'd already completed the national entry steps in Japan on time, your application could still be alive and kicking there. It would depend on Japanese law, but the international withdrawal doesn't automatically kill the timely national filing you already made.
That's really interesting. So international actions don't always override prior national actions if they were done correctly and on time. It shows how these two systems, PCT and national, kind of work together but also have their own tracks.
It really does. It highlights why you need to know both the international rules and the specific national rules for the countries you care about.
Okay, so far it's all been about the applicant choosing to withdraw, but MPEP 1880 also touches on times when it's not your choice, right? When elections just get canceled.
That's right. The section mentions elections being canceled ex officio, fancy term for by official action. This is when the IPEA steps in and cancels an election, not because you asked them to.
Why would they do that?
Usually for housekeeping reasons, really. It happens if you, say, elected a state that you hadn't actually designated in your initial PCT filing. Or maybe you elected a state that isn't even part of the Chapter 2 examination system.
Ah, so the system is just correcting errors, elections that weren't valid to begin with under the rules.
Exactly. The administrative instructions, specifically Section 606, tell the IPEA to mark these invalid elections as canceled. Maybe they draw a line through them on the form or bracket them, and then they have to let you know they've done it.
So that's purely administrative cleanup, totally different from you deciding strategically to withdraw.
Correct. It ensures the official record is accurate. It doesn't carry the same weight as you actively deciding to terminate your interest in a country.
This all brings up a really important point about authority. Withdrawing a demand or election sounds like a big deal, potentially ending rights. Who actually gets to make that call?
It is a big deal, and the rules are strict. Any notice to withdraw must be signed by all of the applicants listed on the international application, not just one person if there are multiple co-applicants.
What about using a power of attorney? If you've authorized your patent agent to handle things, can they sign the withdrawal?
Okay, so powers of attorney are generally used in PCT filings, but withdrawal is special. The rule is that the requirement for all applicants to sign a withdrawal cannot be waived, even if there's a power of attorney that allows an agent to act on other matters.
Wait, really? So even with a POA, the agent can't just sign the withdrawal notice if there's more than one applicant?
That's the rule. The thinking is that withdrawal is so final, potentially extinguishing rights, that it needs the explicit sign-off from every single party considered an applicant.
An applicant itself isn't always straightforward, especially after things like the America Invents Act, right? It might not just be the inventors anymore.
Correct. Depending on when the application was filed and the circumstances, the applicant could be inventors, assignees like companies, or people obligated to assign. It can get complicated figuring out who exactly needs to sign.
So combining that complexity with the non-waivable signature rule
means getting a valid withdrawal notice submitted can sometimes be a significant hurdle. You might need multiple signatures from different people, maybe even different companies. It really underlines why this rule exists. It's a safeguard to make sure everyone with a stake agrees before rights are potentially lost.
Okay, we've gone through the definitions, the crucial 30-month timing, where to send the notice, the big consequence of termination, but also that key exception, the automatic cancellations, and now this strict signature rule. So why should you, listening right now, really care about these MPP 1880 details?
Well, fundamentally, if you're dealing with PCT applications, knowing these rules gives you control.
Yeah, control over your strategy. If things change business focus, tech developments, or just the budget for national fees, you know how and when you can pull back cleanly. It lets you manage your international portfolio and costs effectively.
And just as crucial, it helps you avoid accidentally losing rights. Knowing the deadline is 30 months, knowing it has to get to the IB, knowing everyone needs to sign. Understanding that prevents mistakes that could inadvertently terminate your application where you didn't intend to.
Plus, understanding those finer points, like the Japan example where national filing might save you despite an international withdrawal, gives you a much smarter perspective on how the whole international versus national system plays out.
It helps you anticipate issues and make sure that if you do withdraw, it happens exactly when and how you intended to, based on that IB receipt date.
Right, so let's recap this deep dive into MPEP 1880. We've talked about withdrawing the demand for examination or the election of specific states.
We nailed down that critical 30-month deadline from the priority date and emphasized that the notice has to land at the International Bureau. Their receipt date is what counts.
We looked at the main effect termination in the withdrawn state, but also that important lifeline connected to PCT Article 22 and timely national phase actions already taken.
We also made sure to distinguish applicant withdrawal from those ex officio cancellations the IPEA does for administrative cleanup under Section 606.
And finally, we hammered home that super strict non-waivable rule. All applicants must sign the withdrawal notice. No shortcuts there.
Here's maybe a final thought to leave you with. Look at all the detail packed into this one section, MPP 1880, and the PCT rules behind it. The precise timing, the specific recipient for the notice, the exact moment it becomes effective, who has to sign. It all just screams how complex and, frankly, high-stakes international patent protection is. Even these procedural steps are loaded with legal weight.
It's a good reminder that navigating the global IP landscape requires real attention to detail. Huge thank again to Mike Shepard for organizing this whole MPP series.
And one last time, please remember, this discussion was put together with AI assistance. It's for your general info and education. It's definitely not legal advice. Always go to the official MPP text or consult a qualified patent practitioner for guidance on your specific patent matters.